Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. May we please have a first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. The first chapter of the Bhagavatam describes the sages at Naima Sharanya, Nimishe, Nimishakshetre, Rishaya, Shaunakadaya. That one day, at Naima Sharanya, which means the place where nobody blinks, the eyelids don't move because they're fixed in hearing. And Ugrashava, Sutta Goswami, will be the speaker. He's been assigned by the sages to speak based on Veta Tvam Saumya Tat Sarvam Tastadanugrahat Bruyu Snigdasha Shishyasya Guravo Guhyamapyuta. He's Guyam, he's learned all the confidential secrets about devotional service. He knows the essence of the Vedas because he's gentle. Veta Tvam Saumya. Saumya means that he's a gentle soul. And gentle means humble and sincere. Tadanugrahat. Because of that, he's received the anugrahat, the mercy of all his teachers. He's had exalted teachers, and he was able to learn everything from them. Bruyu snigdasha sisyasya guravo guhyamapyuta. And therefore, they're putting Ugrashrava, who's also, Ugra means something ferocious, and Shrava means hearing. So he dedicated his life to hearing in a very ferocious way. Don't be afraid to be ferocious, not with others, but when it comes to hearing Krishna consciousness, because this is the guaranteed way in which one will advance in Krishna consciousness is by ferociously hearing. What's more, it satisfies the mind. The mind wants sense enjoyment. Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam taya prahita chetasam. In the Bhagavad Gita says, Krishna says, people are eager to enjoy some sense object. Bhogaishvarya, and they want some opulence in their life. Prasaktanam taya prahita chetasam. And when one's mind flows in that direction, he says, that it can't be steady. And you can't find any peace. Whereas, as Krishna describes in the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, there's a way in which when you perform sacrifice comes from the word sacred. When you sacrifice something for a higher cause, you're giving something to a worthy person, sacrifice means. What you have, your asset that you have, you're giving it to somebody higher. And by that gesture, you receive some gift in return. And there's a fruit. Krishna says that this is the way to be well aligned in the universe. Jagnai tat sarvano, jagnar tat karmano nyatra loko yam karma vandana. That by this kind of sacrifice, the whole universe is set up in such a way that there are divine sacrifices, which is almost redundant to say divine sacrifices, that you'll have an abundance of everything you need in this lifetime. That's how the world's set up. And then you'll be qualified to go back home, back to Godhead. So we first, before embarking on hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, offer our obeisances again and again to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who, representing the sages at Naimisharanya and Ugrashrava, has kindly brought the Srimad Bhagavatam to the world and has advocated for hearing it. And not only that, he made it available. Where else would you get a Bhagavatam before Prabhupada came with the Bhagavatam? That was good foresight, right? If you're going to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, especially the Western world, as his guru told him, then you'd probably need the Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada mentions this as he comes across the ocean on the Jaladuta, that I'm depending on the sound vibration of the Bhagavatam to purify those who are eager to go back home, back to Godhead, or even those who don't know that there is a prospect for going back to Godhead, because as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a way in which people who are uninformed, vitaraga bhaya krodha, they're afflicted by attraction to the material world and think that they're just not trying hard enough. That's why they're not getting the kind of satisfaction they need. And I try, and I try, and I try, but I can't get no satisfaction. That's a mantra from the 60s. And then there's those who are afraid of material existence. They give up on their personhood. And they say, because it's so hard, it's a hard rain going to fall. Then they feel that because these hard rains are always falling on me, that I will subscribe to the erroneous idea that I'm not a person. That doesn't solve the problem, because we are persons. And then there's people who react, especially if they have bad childhoods, with anger. And they resort to anger against the Supreme. They rail against the Supreme. There are plenty of philosophers, writers who have written whole novels railing against the universe. Herman Melville, as an example, is given often as an example in literature classes of the existentialists who say, there's nothing out there but a void. You may scream into the void, no one will hear you. This is a dire sense of what our existence is. And then there are those who codified these ideas in philosophies that say we're not actually people, we don't exist, we're only a process, which is what the materialists say, and also some so-called spiritual philosophies. They say you don't actually exist, it's only a happenstance that you have come to consciousness, but once you become liberated or enlightened, of course there's nobody to become enlightened, so once you give up the idea even of enlightenment and you become nothing, then there's just stillness. These Krishna refutes in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Naiva kinchit karomiti yuktamanyeta tadvavid. That a self-realized person realizes that life goes on, and that the external senses are being controlled by the three modes of material nature, but he or she realizes that I'm actually the soul within the body. So the Bhagavatam starts at this point of the assembly of sages, a highly consequential meeting where they put forward questions to Suta Goswami for the welfare of the whole world. They would like to know, they would like to, as they say, cut to the chase. Bhurini bhuri karmani shrotavyani vibhagasha ata sadyo trayatsaram samudrita manishaya bruhi bhadraya bhutanam yena ma suprasidati, means that what will satisfy the self. And they say, the spokesperson who's speaking, Shaunaka Rishi, the eldest among them, highly qualified person who gets to ask the questions on behalf of the sages, what is it that will satisfy the heart of all the people of the world? What a nice seminar, huh? How to do good to everybody. And he says, Burini Buri Karmani. There's so many activities recommended in the Vedas. You can't even count them all. Shrotav Shotavyadini Rajendra Drinam Santi Sahasrasa Pashitama Tattvam Grihishu Griyamadinam. This is noted by Shukadeva Goswami. Also, same mood, that so many subject matters for hearing in human society. It's manifest in the form of YouTube, TikTok, and what's the other one? IG. And you can see the varieties of topics. Everybody's an expert on everything. And in the Vedic times, similar idea. There were YouTubes on every corner, somebody espousing some philosophy. It's all the ways in human society. There's the concept of the Tower of Babel, everyone speaking a different idea. And this is confusing. And in fact, one of the ways in which Krishna describes how people become angry and because of frustration of hearing so many different philosophies. And everyone's got a different idea. There is a God, there is no God, you're God. God hates you, God loves you, but he doesn't have a form, and so on. They say, Buddhini Buddhi Karmani Shrotavyani Vibhagasha. There's all these ideas, all these thoughts throughout the Vedas. There are levels of teachings to accommodate different kinds of people in different modes of material nature. So they say, now let's get to the real point. What is the main point here, and how will the people in general be able to access it? And they ask these questions about how does Krishna appear in this world, and what is the way that everyone in the world can come to practice spiritual life in such a way that they'll actually be satisfied. So then we know that Sutta Goswami speaks in the next chapter, and he gives a summary of how one becomes advanced in spiritual life. And of course it includes the verses we're all very familiar with, because everyone here took time, or we took time together to look at them. And as I mentioned earlier, by hearing in the association of devotees, serving the Vaishnavas, and then hearing in the association of devotees, Krishna helps from within the heart to give clear direction. And then we find that even on the path of devotional service, how's the temperature? I was just hoping I didn't have a fever or something. It's nice to have air, right? I always notice it. As soon as I get oxygen in my environment, then I start to feel more optimistic about life. So we find a third chapter that Sutta Goswami mentions the avatars, all the ways that Krishna appears in the world. Not all the ways, he gives a summary of the various incarnations, but he says they're unlimited. They're appearing constantly. And then we find the story of Narada Muni, and how Narada had been a simple person. In fact, not part of the Vedic culture. This is a kind of theme throughout the Bhagavatam, that devotional service is available to the sincere. It's a conclusion we know that Prahlad Maharaj makes, doesn't he, in the very beginning of his prayers? Yeah, which verse is it then? Manye dana abhijana. Is that the one where he says, I think? Manye dana abhijana. I think for all these opulences, that the Krishna is not pleased by these things. But if I'm just sincere and I try to offer prayers, that's another one, right? Which is the other one? No, that's the first one. Which one? Manye jana pinjana rupa tapasu taujas teja prabhava balapauda shabudhi yoga naradanai hi bhavanti parasipunso bhaktyatu tosha bhagavan gajayutapaya. Let's see the next verse. Keep going. Keep going. Tasmad. This is the verse. It's a therefore, it's a conclusion. Those other verses hint at it. First he starts with Brahmadaya, Suragana Munayotasira. He says that all these famous people came and offered obeisances. All the stars were there. And they all said, here's how I'm glorifying the Lord. And then he noticed that Krishna's not happy. He didn't take all those on board. And then he remembered Gajendra, the elephant. He said, well, he was sincere. He tried. Even though he's not a big star, like all these others, Brahmadaya, Suragana, all these demigods who showed up. He said the Lord was pleased because he offered a simple prayer. And then he says that even a person who's born in a low family, a dog-eater family, dog-cooker family, it's their whole cookbook has different recipes about how to eat dogs. I'm just saying. And he said a person like that, if they're sincere, they can purify not only themselves but their whole families. But a so-called Brahmana, this is a reaction against this casteism, this idea that because I was born in a certain family and I have certain qualities or I know verses or whatever it is, which is also echoed in that verse we just talked about, Manye Dana Bijana Rupa Tatpausa. He names as many opulences as you can imagine. He said Krishna doesn't care for those. But a person who's simple, they may be lowly, they may be from outside the Varnashram. They're so far out that they eat dogs, he said. But if that person is sincerely engaged in your devotional service, has a heart for it, then that person, he says, can purify himself and his whole family. But these so-called brahmanas who have a sense of entitlement because they think they know something, they can't even purify themselves, he says. So then in the next verse he says, Naivatmana prabhurayam nijalabha purno manam janada vidusha karano vranite yadyashano bhagavate vaditita manam tachchatmane pratimukasya yata mukashri, which means that he says that when we do devotional service, then we are helping ourselves. And he gives this example that if you go to the mirror and you decorate your face, anybody decorate your face today? Say yes. If you didn't, you got to go back. So you had to decorate your face. And if you decorate your face and you look in the mirror, then you'll go, wow, the reflection is decorated too. And so when we decorate Krishna, it's like our pujaris here. They're so sincere. They come in here early in the morning. They make sure everything's set up. Then they're dreaming all night. They're thinking, how will I decorate Krishna? Which bracelets will I use? Maybe 2 days ahead, 3 days ahead, they're thinking which backdrop goes with this and that. And so they think about decorating Krishna. They kind of throw their clothes on because they're so much in a hurry and they're meditating on decorating Krishna. Pujaris, you with me here? Is this correct? And then they come and they decorate Krishna, and then their heart becomes decorated. So he says, if you decorate Krishna, then you become decorated, just like your face is decorated in the mirror. We're reflections of Krishna. So when we serve him, we become glorified. Then he says, Tasmad aham vikata viklaka ishvarasya sarvatmana. No, it's not. Next one, sorry. Tasmadaham vigata viklaka ishvarasya sarvatmana mahi granami yata manisham nicho jaya guna visargam anupravishta puyeta yena hi puman anuvarnitena. So he concludes here. Tasmad is a conclusion. He's saying that even though I'm from a demoniac family, I can offer prayers. I should endeavor. I should try. Don't give up and say I'm not qualified. That's illegal. And so he said, if you offer sincere prayers to the Lord and recite his glories, then he'll accept it. That's his conclusion. So that's one of the conclusions of the Bhagavatam, when we find that Narada, who came from a very lowly family, and then he met devotees, and he got enlivened to perform devotional service. And then he had an experience of that after his mother died, and he went out on his own. Krishna gave him a free sample of what it feels like to be fully absorbed in him. And then he used his whole lifetime to stay connected with Krishna, even though he was still in the material world. And then he became fully liberated soul. So we find in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavatam a conversation that's consequential, and that is that Vyasadeva is lamenting because he feels like he hasn't performed his duty properly. His duty is to edit the Vedas. Vyasa means editor. The Vedas are co-eternal with the Lord, but they're vast, as we described, and he was bringing in the aspects of the Vedas that are most important for people and presenting them in ways that people in the age of Kali Yuga could appreciate them through the Itihasas and the Puranas and so forth. He wrote the Mahabharata, but still he wasn't satisfied. So he wanted to know from his guru what happened. Why don't I feel fully satisfied? And Narada said that you weren't direct enough about the absolute truth. You equivocated in some ways, and you gave people off-ramps throughout your teachings where they could make a mistake and then think you were saying that it's okay to just half perform devotional service and take to sense gratification and live a comfortable life in the material world. So in that conversation, there are many very important instructions, and turning to the 5th chapter, on the 14th verse, Narada instructing Vyasadeva about what's wrong with him. So if anybody does a self-check, and if you've ever felt, I need some attitude adjustment, or I don't know why I'm feeling confused or morose, if that ever happens to you, it happens to Vyasadeva, so. Narada gives this answer in 14. He says, Tatonyata kinchan yad vavakshata pratagdrashas tatkrita rupa namabhi nakarichit kwapi chadushtita matir labheta vata hatanaur ivaspadam. And it's a metaphor about a boat on the water, and that has no resting place. And if the wind comes along, and it does, on the waterways, wind comes. Like on the ocean, it can be clear and placid, and then a huge storm can come in an hour later, and your life can be in danger. And in any waterway, because it's so flat, and the winds can come and blow your boat away. So we're like that also. In the material world, a strong wind can come and carry us away at any time. And one of the ways that our minds become disturbed, says Narada in this verse, is pratag drashas. Pratag means divided, and drashas means to see. So when you see things separately from Krishna, and you describe them also, tatonyata kinchana, yad vavakshita, means that if you want to talk about something, vavakshita, but it's pratak, it's separate from Krishna. It has nothing to do with Krishna. There's no way to connect it to Krishna. Pratak drushash tatkrita rupa namabi. In different, you may talk about different forms, names, and results. But he says, nakarichit kwapi chadushtita matir, and that is that the oscillating mind will be, or the mind will become disturbed. It will oscillate because of the sound vibration you're giving it. It's not in connection with Krishna, then your mind becomes disturbed. So the translation is, whatever you desire to describe that is separate in vision from the Lord simply reacts with different forms, names, and results to agitate the mind as the wind agitates a boat which has no resting place. And Prabhupada writes as follows. Srila Vyasadeva is the editor of all descriptions of the Vedic literatures, and thus he has described transcendental realization in different ways, namely by fruitive activities, speculative knowledge, mystic power, and devotional service. Besides that, in his various Puranas, he has recommended the worship of so many demigods in different forms and names. The result is that people in general are puzzled how to fix their minds in the service of the Lord. They are always disturbed about finding the real path of self-realization. Srila Narada Dev is stressing this particular defect in the Vedic literatures compiled by Vyasadeva, and thus he is trying to emphasize describing everything in relation with the Supreme Lord, and no one else. In fact, there is nothing existent except the Lord. The Lord is manifested in different expansions. He is the root of the complete tree. He is the stomach of the complete body. Pouring water on the root is the right process to water the tree, as much as feeding the stomach supplies energy to all parts of the body. Therefore, Srila Vyasadeva should not have compiled any Puranas other than the Bhagavad Purana, because a slight deviation from that may create havoc for self-realization. If a slight deviation can create such havoc, then what to speak of deliberate expansion of the ideas separate from the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. The most effective part of worshiping demigods is that it creates a definite conception of pantheism, ending disastrously in many religious sects detrimental to the progress of the principles of the Bhagavatam. Everyone okay? Continuing, which alone can give the accurate direction for self-realization in eternal relation with the personality of Godhead by devotional service and transcendental love. The example of the boat disturbed by whirling wind is suitable in this respect. The diverted mind of the pantheist can never reach the perfection of self-realization due to the disturbed condition of the selection of object. I'll just say that last sentence again because it's poetical. He says the diverted mind of the pantheist can never reach the perfection of self-realization due to the disturbed condition of the selection of object. Wrong object, sir. And a couple last points before we have discussion, and that is, in the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj, he gives this litany of ways in which we interact with the world. Look at verse number 20 in Prahlad's prayers. Does anybody know what it is? It's the Yasmin Yato Yarhi Yena Che Yasya Yasmad verse. So if I ever say, what's verse 20, say, it's the Yasmin Yato Yarhi Yena Che Yasya Yasmad verse. Yasmai, there's a lot of yeses. Yasmin Yato Yarhi Yena Che Yasya Yasmad Yasmayata Yadutaras Twapara Parova Bhava Karoti Vikaroti Prataksabhava Sanchoditas Tarakilam Bhavataksorupam. Listen to this. My dear Lord, everyone in this material world, are you listening? Yes. My dear Lord, everyone in this material world is under the modes of material nature, being influenced by goodness, passion, and ignorance. Everyone, from the greatest personality, Lord Brahma, down to the small ant, works under the influence of these modes. Therefore, everyone in this material world is influenced by your energy. The cause for which they work, the place where they work, the time when they work, the matter due to which they work, the goal of life they have considered final, what to speak of their majors in school. And the process for obtaining this goal are all are nothing but manifestations of your energy. Indeed, since the energy and the energetic are identical, all of them are but manifestations of you. This is the technique of the Bhagavatam to overcome pratak drishas, this idea that there's something separate from the Lord. I work, but that's different from Krishna. Prahlad said, no, your work, the paycheck you get, it's all Krishna's energy. Your boss, Krishna's energy. Your car, Krishna's energy. And finally, in the conversation with Rukmini, Krishna had one day thought that my other queens, especially Satyabhama, become angry with me. And as we know from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Goswami describes how Krishna interacts with his devotees, his intimate devotees, in such a way that sometimes when they get angry at him and they say something out of a sense of anger, that he likes that better than he likes the reverent hymns of the Vedas. When they approach me, he says, in a sulky mood, and they say something in that mood, then Krishna relishes it. And one of his queens, Rukmini, he noticed that she never became disturbed by anything. Satyabhama, on the other hand, she became upset because she saw that Rukmini had received a flower from the Parijata tree, and Satyabhama then never let him forget about it. Where's mine? So vehement was her protest that Krishna felt that he had to take her on a tour of the heavenly planets, and he got her a whole tree. She would only be satisfied with that. Somebody else got a flower, I want a whole tree. Rukmini, on the other hand, didn't give any, there was no rise in her. She was always submissive to Krishna. And so one day he decided that I want to see her angry. I will really appreciate how she'll look at me and the angry words and so forth. So he started telling her, just as they were in a casual mood, he said, why did you marry me anyway? Who am I that you would marry me? There were so many other qualified people. Look at all these kings wanted to marry you. Shishupal, he's wealthy, he's a king, he's powerful. What do I have? He said, I have nothing. I'm niskinchana. You know, kinchana means something, and niskinchana means that I don't have anything. And besides, nobody even knows what caste I'm from, where I came from some village in Vrindavan, and now I'm here pretending to be a king, all these things. Oh, why would you have married me? And he gave 9 or 10 different reasons why she was foolish to have accepted him. But one of them I want to go back to, because what happened after he said all these things, which culminated in him indicating, why don't you go find somebody more qualified? Because you made a mistake. Rather than become angry, she lost her consciousness. She just fainted. She couldn't believe these words were coming from Krishna, her beloved husband. And as it's described poetically, like a plantain leaf, when a hurricane comes, it just knocks it right down flat. She just fell flat on the ground. And then Krishna was surprised, and in a very conciliatory mood, he held her in his arms and began to appease her and said, no, I was just kidding. I just wanted to see if you'd get angry. And then she did sort of become angry. She was very resolute. And she remembered each one of the points that he made, and she very expertly refuted each one of them. Now, the one that really strikes me, they're all striking, but one that relates to today's conversation was when Krishna said, I'm niskinchana, I don't have anything. Rukmini said, that's only true because you are everything. And if someone says that you have a lot, that means there's something you don't have. So that doesn't apply to you. Only niskinchana applies to you. You can't have something because you already are everything. You can't have some opulence, or you can't even have great opulence because you have infinite opulence. All opulences that others display in their life only comes from you anyway, and you're the possessor of all of them. And in that way, she refuted not only that point that Krishna made, but all of them, one after another. And so there's a way that devotees, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita, have this vision that everything's coming from Krishna. Everything belongs to Krishna, everything's within Krishna. And in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 8, Krishna talks about Ananyateta satatam yomam smarate nityasaha. What is it? Tasyaham sulabha partha nitya yukta sayogina. And then 22, Purusha. What's that verse? They're so much easier to remember when you're reciting them. Bhaktya labhyas tvananya yasyantastani bhutani yena sarvam. That's the one. How does it start? Purusha sa para partha bhaktya labhyas tvananya. In this beautiful chapter 8, Krishna's describing how he's answering Arjuna how to remember him at the time of death and what will be somebody's destination by what they remember at death. And then Purusha sa para partha bhaktya labhyas tvananya, that ananya bhakti. You can attain me by this unalloyed devotional service. Yasyanti stani bhutani yena sarvam idam tata. He says this, that I'm within everything. Everything's within me. There's nothing that's separate from me, and therefore you can have this a way of being fully devoted to me, and you'll never be separated from me, and it doesn't matter where you're situated because I'm everything. Everything's within me, and you can always remain in contact with me. So, we needn't to be afraid that we'll be bored with absorbing our minds in Krishna. All of the variety that's available in the material world is boring, on the other hand, because it's all the same thing recycled. And the flavor that one can get from looking at things separate from Krishna ends up in prataktrishas and in a sense of being lost. Even though there's a temporary sense of freedom to look at what everyone wants to and see it different from Krishna. But if one embraces Krishna's presence in all things, then not only do we have the advantage of satisfying our sense for variety, but also when we see everything in relationship with Krishna, then we'll feel fully satisfied, because the only way, according to the sages and according to Narada in these points that he's making to Vyasadeva, that we'll feel satisfied is if we're connected to Krishna, especially with a sense of service and loving service. It's devotional service. And now let's see if you have any reflections or questions. Yes, Bali Mardan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. As you are speaking the Bhagavatam, the purport we are reading for Vyasadeva and Narada's conversation, and I was also same time triggering my mind recently the Lord Ramachandra's appearance in Ayodhya Pratishtha, that was on the Kurma Dwadasi. Lord appears always many times Dwadasi, Bhaman Dwadasi, Baraha Dwadasi, like Kurma Dwadasi. And there is a Kurma Puran, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also referred. So in this Puran, there is a conversation between Narada and Narayan about pantheism and this size of the super soul. So how the paradox is given. So there is a casual talk between Narada and Narayan. Narayan is saying that, oh, the earth is the Vasudha, is the Garyasi. Then Narada said yes. Then again Narayan refuted his own statement. No. The Samudra, the ocean is likely the Paridhi. for the Vasudha. So ocean is great. Then Narada is again repeat, yes, ocean is great. Then he said, no, ocean is not great. Agastya Muni just drank in 1 minute the whole ocean. How can ocean is great? Agastya Muni is actually the great. So why people has to worship ocean and earth? They should worship the Rishi, Agastya Muni. Then Narada said, I was telling you that same thing. Agastya was actually the great. But again, Narayana counterattack, no, Agastya is not great. Agastya is just a star in the sky, a little star. Agastya, there is a 7th star. So one of them is Agastya. So how can he is great? He says, sky is great. Then Narada is saying, yes, I was telling sky is great, and you are becoming irritating to me because you are saying your own statement and you are counter arguing your own statement. Then again said, no, sky is also not great, because just imagine Bali, how Bhamana captured the whole sky. So how come the sky is great? Bhamana is great. Then Narada, I was telling you, God is always great. And you are yourself God. No. There is also not that. Because you are carrying like a thumb size within your heart. And not only that, you are encasing me within your heart as a devotee. So you are great. Then Narada said, I am leaving now. I came here to glorify you and you are glorifying me. So basically the conclusion here is there is a pantheism, why people worship nature, they worship this or that. Then he was giving a gradation, krama, and then he's saying that how God is great, but God says, no, God is not great. The devotee is great. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We see much through the eyes of Narada. One of the ways that Narada reveals to everyone Krishna's opulence, especially in Dwarka, is to go and visit his palaces. It was a gated community, and 16,108 luxury homes. And when Narada went there, he first visited the home where Krishna was with Rukmini, and Krishna greeted him as a worshipable personality. He sat him down, Rukmini fanned him, much the way Sudama, he worshipped Sudama when he came. He washed his feet and he honored him in many different ways, offered prayers and so forth. And of course later on he tells Narada, because he knew Narada would be disturbed by that. He's Narada's worshipable object and he's worshiping Narada, and he said, don't mind, because this is the proper thing to do, to worship the highly elevated devotees. So I'm showing by example in my grihastha pastimes. And Narada then went to various other houses, and in each one he saw that Krishna was engaged in a different way. So although Krishna is one, and how was that manifestation of oneness seen? Every day when he'd leave from his 16,108 palaces, he would exit the house separately, but as he then walked a little further, all of the various forms of Krishna then merged into the one form. Narada had gone from one house to the next, and in each place Krishna reacted similarly as he did in the first house, as if he hadn't seen him before. And after some time, Narada walked in and looked, and he just walked to the next place. And Krishna has this way of interacting with devotees individually. We find it in Vrindavan when he goes for picnic with his friends, and he sits in the middle like the center of a lotus flower, but each one of the friends thinks that he's interacting with me alone. So although Krishna is absolute, he's everything, he's everywhere, he always has an individual relationship with every living entity. And that relationship is unique. There's no one relationship that Krishna has with a living entity, and there are unlimited living entities that's the same as another. We have vaisesikaprabhu coming live from Mysore, remembered by the palace and also Mysore Pak. That's all right. See if you can read lips. Just put them in the center and keep talking, but stay on mute and we'll see if we can understand your question.
Try. Okay, finally, I was able to unmute. Dandavat Pranam Guru Maharaj. Allu Srila
Hare Krishna,
Prabhupada.
Vaishnava.
Maharaj, when you were relating that sweet exchange between Krishna and Rukmini about Niskinchana and how Devi Rukmini gives a totally different meaning, I was reminded of a similar exchange that happens in the third canto uh, between Hiranyaksha and Varahadev. Uh, Hiranyaksha also throws insults at Varahadev, but Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, I think, he gives explanations using different rules of grammar, Sanskrit grammar, and he brings out totally the opposite meaning. For example, I think if I remember correctly, he says Hiranyaksha abuses the Lord as Agnya, as fool, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains this as there is no knowledge which is not known to you, or something like that, right? Or Suradhama, he says you are the lowest of the Suras, and again Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad explains it as you are the best amongst the Suras. So I was just wondering how the acharyas and the devotees are so full of Krishna consciousness that they cannot tolerate to hear any blasphemy of the Lord, and they say no, no, no. This is what it actually meant. So yeah, just wanted to share that. Thank you.
This is the prerogative of one who has complete vision. One sees Maya and Krishna simultaneously, as we know from the trance of Vyasadeva. He saw that Maya was present, but she stayed outside. And she also saw the living entities were under full control. So was Maya. The living entities were bewildered, in fact, by the material nature. And someone, as Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, who is above the modes of nature, above the control of the modes of material nature, sees how Krishna's energies are working perfectly. And in the case of Vidura, when he was having an argument with his family members, first time that's ever happened, there's a way that Duryodhana was so envious of him. He uttered words that were so hurtful to Vidura, saying, I don't even know, how can we count you as a member of the family? Who brought you in here? It was political. He was politically motivated, was Duryodhana. And at that time, Prabhupada mentions that both Mahamaya and Yogamaya were simultaneously visible, because Vidura could see that Duryodhana, as he had stated many times in many places, was influenced by the modes of material nature. And his anger was inordinate and uncalled for. So was his stance against the Pandavas. It was due to envy within the heart. But simultaneously, even in that circumstance when he was being severely criticized by one of his family members, he saw Yogamaya. He saw Krishna opening the door for him, saying, and then you can just go out and go on the yatra now, because now you have a legitimate excuse to walk out and go on pilgrimage, which I notice is something that a lot of sages do in various circumstances. When all else fails, go on pilgrimage. And Yogamaya and Mahamaya are always there according to the vision of the person who's perceiving them. But for devotee, they can see them side by side, and therefore they're known as Paramahamsa. A Paramahamsa is a swan, and a swan has a unique talent. If you give swan a mixture of milk and water, then the swan will drink that mixture but siphon out. Is siphon the right word? I suppose we can use it. Siphon the water out and take only the milk. If we give you a glass of water and we mix it with half milk, and then you could drink it, but only drink the milk and then leave the water. Possible? Well, swan can do it. It has a coagulant in its beak that it can produce so that the milk becomes a solid, and then you can swallow it, semi-solid, and then he swallows it, and then the water goes out the side of his beak. So there's a way that those who are enlightened by the Bhagavad Gita, if you read Bhagavad Gita, then you can look at the world and you can see that it appears that we're mixed into Maya, but you're able to separate the two and see what's the Maya and what is the internal energy of the Lord. Or you can see that everything is actually the internal energy of the Lord in the highest vision, and everything's working for the purpose of the Lord. Nothing separate. Pritak drishas. That comes from reading Bhagavad Gita. Okay, we have Shankari Kaur.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, please accept my most respectful obeisances at your lotus feet. My pranams to all the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, Guru Maharaj, one realization, you just said that all of us, every living entity, has a unique relationship with Krishna. So I was just thinking that, yes, if we do not reciprocate and go back to him, probably he'll be missing that unique relationship. So all the more reasons for us to go back and make other people realize of that too, so that they can also try their best to go back home, back to Godhead, and give Krishna what he's missing in that sense. And Guru Maharaj, my question is, we are talking about the three modes of material nature. We are in that's what Prahlad Maharaj says. Now, is it the choices that we make that kind of feeds into these mode of material nature, and it makes one mode more powerful than the other so that they can act on us? So Guru Maharaj, my question is that, is my effort alone enough that the choices that I'm making, the kind of activities that I do, the desires that I have, the wishes that I have, the words that I speak towards people, the kind of the mode that I'm feeding, that mode is going to get prominent and prominent, and then I can stay in that level of goodness if those are the choices that I'm making? Or do I need something else, or my choices are not enough?
Yeah, such an important question. Thank you very much for asking. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Tattvavitu mahabaho gunakarma vibhagayo gunaguneshu vartanta iti matva nasajite. Could you please put that up? Who knows where it is for 20 points? Who knows approximately where it is? It's at 328 for 20 points. So Krishna answers this question when he says that those who are tattvavit, tattva, tat means that, and tattva means thatness. If you're a vit who knows what are the different categories of energy of the world, like there's Vedanti tattvavidas tattvam yajganamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdite. Even in understanding the absolute truth, there are these different categories of the absolute truth. There's not all just one. Although there's one, within the one there's variety. And when one knows also the categorical way in which the material modes of nature, although presenting variety, ultimately avyakta vyaktimapanam manyate mama buddhaya parambhava majananto mama bhuta maheshwara. No, mamavyam anutamam. There's a quite a bit of description in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna talks about how the material world comes and goes, and it's categorically different from the spiritual world, because he describes the avyaktam and vyaktam. What's the next verse? Bhutva praliyate. He said it's manifest again and again, and it's destroyed again and again. No, not there. I meant in the 8th chapter. And then he says, Parastasmat tu bhavonyo vyakto vyaktat sanatana yaksak sarveshu bhuteshu nashyatsu navinashiti. There's a different kind of energy, he's saying. It's important to know. Otherwise, if I think the material energy is the all in all, then I have no choices beyond the three modes of material nature, right? Everything I decide to do, if I don't have an alternative outside the modes of material nature, or a destination outside of it, or an object of meditation that's outside the modes of material nature, then I'm restricted to just that realm. So to tattva vit means somebody who knows that there are different categories of energy that you can point to. And nasato vidite bhavo, nabhavo vidite sata ubayorapi drishnon tas tvanayos tattva darshibi. Again, a tattva darshibi, somebody who knows tat. What is the material energy, what is the spiritual energy, and the varieties within them. And that's what Krishna is saying, that somebody who's a seer of truth, or is a seer of tattva, of categories of energy, they understand that there's a difference between the body and the soul, as an example. So if you're a tattva vit, and he calls Arjuna Mahabaho, which means Almighty Armed One, guna karma vibhagayo guna guneshu vartanta iti matva nasajjate, and we'll look at the translation, word for word first. Guna karma vibhagayo. He sees the differences, you see. Guna, guneshu, vartante, iti matva nasajjate. And the translation is that one who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, O mighty arm, does not entangle himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the differences between work and devotion and work for fruit of results. And Prabhupada comments, the knower of the absolute truth is convinced of his awkward position in material association. He knows that he is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and that his position should not be in the material creation. He knows his real identity as part and parcel of the Supreme, who is eternal bliss and knowledge, and he realizes that somehow or other he is entrapped in the material conception of life. You know all these things, right? Say yes. In his pure state of existence, he is meant to dovetail his activities in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. He therefore engages himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness and becomes naturally unattached to the activities of the material senses, which are all circumstantial and temporary. He knows that his material condition of life is under the supreme control of the Lord. Consequently, is not disturbed by all kinds of material reactions, which he considers to be the mercy of the Lord. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, one who knows the absolute truth in three different features, namely Brahman, Paramatma, and the Supreme Personality of God, it is called, Vananti tat tat bavidas, tat fam yajganamadvayam, right? Brikashori, right? So, is called Tattva-vit, for he knows also his own factual position in relationship with the Supreme. So when one becomes Krishna conscious and becomes a Tattva-vit, then the natural result is that one doesn't become more entangled in the three modes of material nature, and as a consequence of performing devotional service, karmani nirdahati kintucha bhakti bhajan, Brahma says, it's naturally that the results of past karma, like there are different stages of karma. Aparabdha palam papam kutam bijam palon mukam kramenaiva praliyante vishnu bhakti ratatmanam. As described in the Padma Purana, the karma, which comes from our interaction with the three modes of material nature, is in different phases. So there's aprarabdha, which means it's not manifested yet. Interesting, you do something and you think, I got away with that, right? But it's still there in a seed form. It's subtle. Seeds are very subtle, but the seed's planted, so it's going to, at a certain time, fructify. Aparada, palam papam, kutam bijam palom mukam. These are categories of manifestation of one's karma. Sometimes kuta, bija, palon mukam. There's a way that something starts in a very subtle form and then it gradually manifests. And then it comes out and produces a whole fruit. That's called prarabdha. For instance, when we're born in the world and we get a body, that's the full manifestation of our karma from our last life, as in shariram yaravapnoti yachchap yukramatishvara grihit vaitani samyati vayur gandham vivashaya. The material nature has accommodated you, or as Patanjali Muni says in the Yoga Sutras, when you leave this body, you have certain desires, an aggregate of desires, and those get filled in by material nature. Exactly what you wanted. Here's your body to try to enjoy, and you get a very specific nose, customized eyes, ears, specially built for you, all thrown in for free by material nature. Tell you what I'm going to do for you, little jiva. And so there's a way in which we get this full manifestation of our karma from our last life. Now, if we come into knowledge, tattvavitu mahabaho, and we perform devotional service, then the karma, which means our natural inclination to hold on to certain desires, we're impelled, as if we're pushed. Everyone thinks I'm making an independent choice, but that's not true. If you think I like, what do you like? I don't know. No, ice cream. Well, everyone likes ice cream. There's certain likes and dislikes we have. These are due to our predisposition to liking them based on the momentum from our past lives, and that's called karma. Bhuta bhavod bhavakarov sargo karma samchita. We're manifesting our world based on the desires we already have that's pushing us into various situations. What Shankari Kaur was asking about, does that pushing diminish? And the answer is yes. By knowledge and especially by association with the Vaishnavas, the heart changes. And there's a sense of, I don't want to cooperate anymore. Kamadinam katina katida palita durni deshas desham jata mayina karana natrapa no pashanti utsridaitanata yarupate samprata labda buddhis tamayata sharanam abhayam mam nyukshvat vadasye. It's a prayer. When a devotee starts to awaken and see that I'm being pushed around here. These aren't in my interest. These pushings of desires that are coming in, this is the karma from my past life. I had bad association. And now my senses, they've become the representatives of all these bad people that I've met. And now they've become bad masters themselves. But the devotee, labda buddhi, the intelligence awakens. And then one gets this special endowment called vivek, which means discrimination. Not everyone has it. Kapila Dev describes it. It's part of the awakening mind of the devotee called labda buddhi, and then says that I don't want that anymore. Now one starts to make an independent choice, which is utsrijayatanata yarupate samprata labda buddhi. Now I want to serve Krishna instead. So that awakening of choice comes, the vivek, discrimination, comes to the mind of the devotee by association with devotees, by hearing Bhagavad Gita, as an example. Then one becomes tattvavit, and one is able to work in the world without the same pushings of the senses. Which verse would you quote from the second chapter of the Bhagavatam, which would indicate that exact time in which one realizes that one's no longer being pushed by the senses as hard as one was previously to taking the devotional service? For 25 points. Thank you. Who said that? Our usual pundits? You did it. Very good. Go ahead. But don't use a mic, because we're against those here at ISV. We don't want people online to hear what you have to say. We're against that.
Tada rajas tamo bhava kama lobha dayaschaye chete ete ranaviddham stitam sattve prasidha.
Now say it a little more dramatically.
Tada rajastamo
No. Like you know those posters in Vrindavan of, people come do Bhagavad Saptaha and they have a turban and the whole thing?
Tada
Put
rajastamo bhava.
like this. Be dramatic. Go. It's slower.
Rajastamo bhava kam lobhadayaschaye cheta eterana vidham stitam sattve prasidati.
Okay. I tell how that's relevant to our conversation now.
So cheta eter anabidham. Anabidham means some pinching effect. So tada rajastamo bhava kama lobha dayashe. So when goes beyond kama and lobha, so cheta eter anabidham. So the pinching effect of these senses that goes away.
And what has happened? Tada. It just happens by the association of devotees and by hearing, right? Isn't it? Tada rajas tamo bhava. You notice these pinchings, as Prabhu is pointing out. Prabhupada used that word in his lecture on this, that you're being pinched, and it's like, go do that. It's like, I don't have that anymore. It's diminishing by Krishna's grace. So there is a life. There is a real life independent of the tyranny of the mind and the senses. That's devotional service. And by association of devotees and by hearing the Bhagavat, that means the two Bhagavats, we associate with the person Bhagavat, the person who's imbibed the Bhagavatam and lives it, and we hear the Bhagavatam. And by those two, we actually become free. And we're not subjected to the pushings of the three modes of material nature. What to speak of, our intelligence becomes enlightened. Krishna, when telling Arjuna how to become free from lust, who can become free from lust? It's impossible unless there's intervention from the outside. So Krishna says, you start with your intellect. Evam buddhi param buddva samstabhyatmanamatmana jahishatra mahabaho kamarupam darasadam. He said, first, make sure your intelligence is informed. You have vivek, or discrimination. You know which category of energy to engage with, and don't get fooled. Don't get fooled again. Okay. Only Raghava knows what that means. Okay, let's see. Bhakti Divya from Atlanta, please. 3 hours later there, right? We have representatives.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, I had a question. You spoke about serving Vaishnavas. So how can we do that? Like what's the best way to serve Vaishnavas?
What did she ask? Now I couldn't understand it from that. How do we serve Vaishnavas?
Yes.
How do you serve a Vaishnav? Well, first of all, we have to have the intention to serve. If we have an intention to serve and we're very attentive to a Vaishnav, you can watch and see what somebody needs. That's first-class service. This is mentioned in the Bhagavatam. First-class service is that you look and you say, how can I serve? What does the person want and need? What's the person's desire? And before they ask for it, then you know. That's first-class service. Then the next level of service is the person asks and you're immediately ready for it. And then the next one is that, what's the next one? There's 4 altogether. Huh? What is
Even
it?
after asking, not doing.
What?
Even after asking, they don't do. The
I
third,
thought that was the 4th one.
I think there are 3 more.
Oh, maybe
Sorry,
the 3rd one is they go, all right, I guess I'll do it. Is it grudgingly? And then the last one is that they just don't do it. There are nuances in one's expertise in service, and there's a difference. So first of all is to have this mood. Krishna says if you want to get ahead in life, spiritual life, he gives these jewels of wisdom that If you're pranipat, which means you have a submissive attitude. If you don't have that, if you have another kind of attitude that you're going to show off or something like that, it may not come off as well. And then you also have to render service by being very attentive and then asking important questions. And Prabhupada says in the Bhagavatam, you're not entitled to ask for any favors also from an advanced devotee until you do service. Don't go asking and say, can you give me this, can you give me that, until you've satisfied the person. That's also first class. And, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you for the question. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I think I will extend what Divya Mataji was asking, that so we want to serve the Vaishnavas, but then I notice most of when I say, first thing is Vaishnava is not very prominent, cannot say from the dress or something that who is Vaishnava. Mostly I see here, they look very normal, and you see outside, I won't know that they have so deep inside there, they're harboring something so deep inside them. So that's one thing, is they're so unassuming, you cannot immediately say oh, this is the person. The other thing is,
let me just answer that first. It's okay. Krishna says, Api chetsudaracharo bhajate mamananya bhak sadhureva samantavya samyag vyavasitohisa. Don't judge the Vaishnav by external circumstances. If the person has any intention to serve Krishna, even if that person seems to still be worldly, Krishna emphatically says, that's a sadhu. You should consider a sadhu. And there are different ways of course, there are gradations of Vaishnavas mentioned by Rupa Goswami. And he says that one type of person is the one who can just say Hare Krishna. Anybody. If you hear it anywhere from anybody and they say Hare Krishna, your mind should go to that person and offer obeisances and say, this is a special person. And then if you see somebody who's taken a vow to chant Hare Krishna, then you should go out of your way, double back, and it's like this. And then the third type is the person who you can observe and notice that they've actually purified their hearts. They're genuinely not interested in finding fault with others for their own aggrandizement. Go ahead.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So that helps. First thing is finding Vaishnavas around, because if you go out in the world, it's very difficult to find Vaishnavas whom we can at least recognize. The second part is, most of the time the Vaishnavas, they are so humble, they hesitate to take anything, when I feel okay, so particularly here I notice maybe I can get a seat, but then they would I'll get it myself. So how do you get there?
Krishna noticed that too, because he wants to serve the devotees, and the devotees won't take anything from Krishna. So if you can figure out a way, then Krishna becomes more pleased with you. And generally, Vaishnavas are interested in serving Krishna through their guru. A Vaishnava is somebody who's subservient to a Vaishnava. So what a Vaishnava is, a Vaishnava means somebody who's working under a Vaishnava. Vaishnavas are not independent. It's I'm not working under anybody. I'm just self-realized. But a Vaishnava is somebody who's working under a Vaishnava. Working under a Vaishnava means that person has service under a Vaishnava. And if you can see what service that person has and then says, how can I assist in that service, then that generally, even if it's the smallest of services, it leads to something. It leads to you having service with that Vaishnava. And then it becomes a heartfelt connection. And there's ways in which, even if that person is reluctant to accept service, him or herself, there are huge wide openings that you can satisfy that person by serving in such a way that that Vaishnava can serve the Vaishnava that he or she is serving. So service is the way in. It's a great secret. Most people think that you have to become a great master and then control everybody. But actually, the way to get into the highest of association is through a service mood, and find where you can do service. So there's no doubt, Vaishnavas are eager to expand their service, and they need help in doing that. Just the way Rupa Goswami says, when I chant Hare Krishna, I desire millions of ears. And similarly, if somebody is serving their spiritual master and they feel that I need more help, I need millions of people to help me because I have a big idea about how to serve, then if you come up to that person and say, could I be one of those millions of people? And then they'll give you some service so that you can be connected. So that's the way that the Guru Parampara works. Prajaras Bhavana.
One of the purports we read where you took a double take where it was poetic, the last sentence where it said the disturbed condition of the object. In the sense of all the different religions and all the different things that the verse was talking about, how can we say that the object is in a disturbed condition? Maybe it's because, like, for example, if someone's worshipping impersonal Brahman, or not worshipping, but that's what their goal is, or Paramatma, or some demigod, how can we say that that's a disturbed condition?
First look up the word disturb so we can have a clear idea. The idea is that we're in resonance with service to Krishna, loving service. And without that, then there will be some sense of disturbance. For instance, yene ravindaksha vimuktamaninas tvayasta bhavad avashudha pudhaya aruya krishna paramparam tata patantyato nadrita yushma angraya. Bhagavatam says that unless you get into a clear relationship, loving relationship with the personality of Godhead, if you don't know who the personality of Godhead is, you'll be left feeling incomplete. If you feel incomplete, then ultimately you'll take shelter of the material world. Ultimately, you'll have to do that. We have to feel complete in our relationship with Krishna. As yet pada pankacha palasa vilasya bhakta karmashrayan gratitamukratayanti santa tadvanda rikta matayo yatayo pirudha shroto ganas tamaranam bhajavasudeva. If you're rikta matayo, which means your head's empty of the relationship with Krishna, then you're going to seek it somewhere else. And so, Narada mentions this in the chapter. He says, Naishkarmyam apyachuta vabha varjitam nachobate jnanam alam niranjanam kutak punas shashvat abhadramishvare nacharpitam karma yarapyakaranam. That is, whatever self-realization activities you're doing, it can be idea of I'm detached from the material world. Everything I get, I give away. But if it doesn't have a chutabhava, or a connection with Krishna, then you're eventually going to be in a disturbed condition. What does disturbed mean? Disturbed. Wonder if you can just be turbed.
Disturb is a verb which means to frighten, alarm, break up the
To frighten, alarm.
Break up the tranquility of.
Break up the tranquility of.
It can also mean to stop or hinder.
Stop or hinder.
And it comes from dis, completely, and turber, to disorder.
Huh. Yeah, when we're out of alignment, then we have to, I'm finished. We have Gita presentation. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining the Srimad Bhagavatam class.